Yes, this is the MacBook Pro with the M1 chip. And I'm quite upset because this little thing here outperformed my Mac Pro I bought last year by a long shot. What up guys, welcome back to another episode. My name is Eddie Bear and today we are comparing the new 2020 13-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 chip against the 2016 MacBook Pro against my 2019 Mac Pro. Now you may be wondering, is this even a fair comparison? Well, the M1 chip outran my Mac Pro that I bought last year for around 8,000 euros by such a long run that it's not even funny anymore. At this point, you are even wondering, well, should I even get a Mac Pro? Well, the short answer is this little thing for 2,000 euros is outperforming everything else I have in this room. In today's video, I'm giving you an overview how the M1 performs out of the perspective of a video creative under real-life conditions like rendering out projects, video playback performance, and I'm also giving you some benchmark results. But first, let's begin with simple things like camera performance, sound quality, and battery life. And since I was so impressed by the sound quality of the 13-inch 2020 MacBook Pro, I wanted to give you a quick comparison between the 2016 MacBook Pro 15-inch and the new 2020 13-inch.
Riding on the dizzying
So what do you think? Which one of the two do you like better? I think the 13-inch MacBook Pro has nicer high tones and it has more bass in it. The 2016 MacBook Pro kinda sounds like a tin can compared to the new 2020 13-inch, at least in my opinion. Apple also once again has proven that it's not about megapixels, it's all about image processing. The M1's image processing is reducing the noise within the image and at the same time it is enhancing the lighting conditions and also the details within the image. I also should mention that the rumors regarding the battery life were also true. The MacBook Pro is without a doubt capable of carrying you through the whole day thanks to the M1 chip. To give you a brief understanding of what kind of CPUs we are comparing, this 2016 MacBook Pro is running an Intel i7-6820HQ 4-core processor, whilst the M1 chip is running, well, 8 cores, which are 4 high compute power cores and 4 low power cores. And the Mac Pro is running a Xeon 12-core W3235 processor. And since normal people like you and I have no clue what's behind all these names and numbers, let me give you some Cinebench scores that you have a better understanding what we're talking about performance-wise. So this MacBook Pro from 2016 is scoring 4159 points, this M1 chip is scoring 7555, and the 12-core Xeon in the Mac Pro is scoring whopping 14,584 points. So in theory, the Mac Pro should outperform everything that is on this table, right? Now here comes the weird part. No. If you're doing a Cinebench single core test with the 2016 MacBook Pro, it is scoring 806 points. If you're doing a single core test with the Xeon processor, you are scoring 1035 points. But if you're testing the M1 chip, you are scoring 1,489 points. And the same pattern can be observed if you take Geekbench for example. If you're taking the 2016 MacBook Pro, it is kinda scoring similar values to the ones that we know from Cinebench. If you take a look at its GPU performance, well, it's not bad, but it's still outperformed by the M1 chip. The Mac Pro is outperforming the M1 graphics performance cause it is packing the Radeon 7. But how does this translate to the real world use? Since the M1 chip is hard to measure in traditional benchmarks, I wanted to go away from them and try some other approach. The only other benchmark I wanted to showcase here is the Bruce 5K test for Final Cut, because it will give you a better understanding how your Mac behaves under massive pressure of generating new effects. In this test, the 2016 MacBook Pro was done within 26 seconds, the M1 chip was completed in 19 seconds, and the Mac Pro, thanks to its Radeon 7, was done within 8 seconds of rendering. By the way, today is somewhat of a premiere, cause this is the first time ever I'm giving you this kind of view into my studio, and what we are about to do here is that I'm giving you some playback feedback on footage that I recorded on my Canon EOS R5, so you can see how super intensive footage will be handled on the different systems. To level the playing field a bit, I'm using my Thunderbolt 3 SSD here, which is super fast, and therefore we can only focus on the CPU and GPU performance, and we don't have to focus on the storage in the different systems. The first footage you're about to see is Cinema 4K Fine, which is the highest image quality that can be recorded aside from 8K in the EOS R5. Let's begin with the most expensive of the bunch, the Mac Pro. Here you can see I created multiple projects, and in this timeline I dropped one stream of Cinema 4K Fine in 25 frames, and let's see how it plays back. So you can see after a few seconds it's already starting to chop up, especially here on the wave. You can see that there is always some frame dropping going on. And if we take a look at the CPU and GPU performance, you can see that the CPU is kind of bored, and also the GPU is not really struggling to give us the playback, but somehow still the whole playback is choppy and it's hard to work with. If we now switch to a different timeline where I stacked up two streams of the Cinema 4K Fine footage, you can see this whole effect intensifies a lot. And the CPU receives significantly more stress on top. So you can see we are now at 48%, somewhere around 50 almost, while it is playing back. And if we switch to a 4-stream timeline, where all of the 4 streams are playbacked simultaneously, you can see that the CPU load goes all the way to 100%. At this point, the whole playback turns into a slideshow, and you will have a hard time editing a project where you have 4 of these streams on top of each other. So yeah, now let's take a look at Cinema 4K at 50 frames per second. And we can see that right from the start, the Mac Pro has an issue playing it back. We already have frames dropped here, so it will be no fun to work with these kind of footages. If we now switch over to 2 streams, the whole thing intensifies even further. We getting even more choppy footage, and yeah, no big difference to Cinema 4K, but with 50 frames, you have more image information and it will get harder for you to edit this kind of footage. The next timeline will be the most intense one, because it's Cinema 8K in RAW, and it is the most CPU heavy footage I have available here. So let's see how it works. Yeah, the Mac Pro can absolutely not play back that kind of footage. I mean, this is RAW, so it is super intensive always on the CPU, and we have 50, 55, 57% of load on the CPU while this is playing back. The GPU is also almost fully utilized. It's always running somewhere around 80% of load, and yeah, it's pretty much not usable in this kind of state. It's all chopped up, and you will not have much fun editing this kind of footage on that Mac Pro with a 12-core Xeon and the Radeon 7 as a GPU. So let's see how the other systems are handling this kind of load. Next up is the MacBook Pro from late 2016, and let's see how this one handled Cinema 4K Fine in 25 frames. Okay, so this one is also choppy right from the start, and the CPU is already at 80%. So I don't think there's much room to work with here. And the graphics is also fully utilized, so there's not much room to extend on this one. Now let's switch to 2 of those streams. Yeah, that's not even a slideshow. This is, yeah, we maybe get a new image every 2 to 3 seconds or so. And with 4 of those streams, it only can get worse. And already the fans are kicking in on the MacBook. So that's the point where you definitely get some noise while working, and you can feel that the MacBook is heating up pretty fast. So this one was in sleep mode before, it was cold, and now it's already warm to the touch. So we have 100% on the CPU, also on the GPU, and there's almost no movement in the image here. So really bad performance for 4K cinema. Let's see how it handles cinema 4K in 50 frames. And right from the start, we are already at 80%. The GPU memory and GPU itself is already fully utilized. Yeah, we are at a heavy load here. And if we switch to 2 streams, yeah, it's fully loaded, 100%. So you will most definitely have a hard time editing that kind of footage on the MacBook Pro late 2016. Now let's see how it can handle 8K raw footage, and I don't have high hopes here. Yeah, 100% on the GPU and 80 somewhat percent on the CPU. Not looking good, and the people are lagging all over the place. So yeah, no possible playback here. Now let's take a look at our newest friend, the MacBook Pro with the M1 chip. Oh, and by the way, this is how loud the MacBook gets. The old late 2016 MacBook. So pretty loud, isn't it? And it's folded up. So this is just running to get all the heat out of the body. And now it turned off. So once again, let's start with Cinema 4K fine in 25 frames. Wow. Okay, so we are able to play back Cinema 4K fine flawlessly on the MacBook Pro with the M1 chip. This is looking great, absolutely. Let's take it up a notch. Let's put 2 of those in one timeline, and I can't believe it. It is still able to play it back flawlessly. Just so you remember, it is all running from the SSD, and it's not running from the local storage that is inside of the MacBook Pro. This one would be even faster than the external one. And if we take a look at the CPU, we are at 20% of load, and the GPU, well, it's running somewhere around 75%, so there is still some room to work with. Let's see how it performs with 4 of those streams. Okay, now we have the first frames that are dropping, but it's still not too bad, so it's still handleable. I mean, you can see here in the wave that we have some drops in there, but it's still not so bad. It's still okay, you know? Okay, now let's see how it looks in Cinema 4K 50 frames. So it looks like people are walking normally. I can't see any kind of lagging yet. The CPU is at roughly 25, 22-ish percent, and the GPU is around 80% or so. So still a very good result for such an entry-level small laptop. And I'm not sure if you did notice, but the fans on this one are silent. They're not even like in a super low noisy way on, they're completely off. Now let's see if that changes if we take a second stream of 50 frames. Okay, now we have some frame drops in there, but it's still manageable. It's not that bad. But you definitely can notice it that we have frame drops in there, so it's alright, but it could be better, of course, always. Let's see how it looks with 8K raw footage. Okay, it started out super fluidly, but now we have some itty bitty frame drops, and the M1 is almost capable of playing back 8K raw footage here. So that's mind-blowing. The Mac Pro back there costs, as it stands there, 8,000 euros. This 2,000 euro MacBook Pro, entry-level MacBook Pro, is faster for such workloads than the 4 times more expensive Mac Pro. Now let's talk about the more interesting stuff. I did various exporting tests with normal projects you do on a day-to-day basis, with color corrections, some effects, and maybe writings and little stuff like that. The footage mostly I used was captured with an iPhone, with Canon cameras which are relying on ProRes, and some of the Atomos Ninja 5. I also did these tests with footage from my Mavic Pro, from GoPros, and all these projects were exported quicker on the 2020 13-inch M1 than it was on the Mac Pro. So when it comes to regular day-to-day work, it seems like the M1 processor is way quicker than every other Intel chip that is out there at the moment. If you then think further, this MacBook Pro here is an entry-level MacBook, and once Apple is starting to ship Mac Pros with high-end Apple Silicon chips, well, Intel, you better make a run for your money. This also means if you were on the fence whether you should buy a Mac or rather buy an Intel-based laptop, well, the answer is pretty simple. It will not get faster than this one. And from this point on, it will only get better. Sure, you don't have to start with the first ever Apple Silicon. But one thing is sure, the further Apple will drive this technology, the better it will get. So what does that mean for you? Are you sticking with Intel or are you jumping ship? If you have any further questions regarding the M1 chip, let me know in the comments below. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next one.